From the National Catholic Register, this is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
How is the church responding to the opioid epidemic in the United States? One community has taken a very unique approach. Register Senior Editor Joan Desmond joins us with the story. And then Peter Jesserer Smith, Register writer, gives us his insights on how parishes can better reach their members on the margins, especially those who are isolated and lonely. Welcome to Register Radio. I'm Jeanette DeMello, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register and co-host of Register Radio.
And I'm Matthew Bunson, Senior Editor for the National Catholic Register and co-host of Register Radio.
And Matthew is here in studio with me, and it's always a pleasure to be in the same room because most of the time we are not. He's in D.C. and I'm here in Birmingham, but great to have you again.
As always, it's a joy to come down to Birmingham, not just to see everyone here at EWTN, but also to be able to spend time with my editor-in-chief.
And it's not only you who's visiting right now. We also have Joan Desmond, who has been a longtime writer for the Register here in Birmingham. Welcome, Joan.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to have our staff meetings, and every time we come, we get a lot done here on the Birmingham campus of EWTN and just collaborating with people here in EWTN, but also planning our Register strategy, our Register coverage. And this year we have done that, certainly. But, Joan, you have also done something unique in your trip here to Alabama. You've visited a community. It's called Chinoculo. And they have a very special purpose. What is that?
Their special purpose is to provide community for young men in this context who are recovering drug addicts. Others more recently, they've opened it up to others dealing with related issues, but mostly young men who have dealt with been part of the whole opioid crisis.
Okay. And this is a place that they live. It's actually a community they live within. Correct.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful setting. It's out actually close to the shrine that Mother Angelica built, it's on
That's
a hillside.
Hanceville.
It's in Hanceville.
Mm-hmm.
It's on a hillside. It's kind of Italian construction, just very open air, and they have a lovely chapel. What's very interesting is they want these young men who need to start over to slow down and take time to really rebuild themselves with the help of the grace of the sacraments, with prayer, with community. A lot of them have not really been living their lives. They've been living a lie. Mm-hmm. And it's an attempt to just bring them down to a very, very kind of low-key level, no internet access. It's very touching, Jeanette.
So I have heard about this community. I have not visited the one there in Hanceville near the Blessed Sacrament Shrine of Mother Angelica, but I had heard about one in Italy. So this is not the only Chinoculo community out there. There are others in Italy. Have you found out yet much about the founding of these communities?
It goes back to a sister of charity, Mother Elvira, who had watched a lot of young people struggling with drug addiction and related issues and felt that they really need community. She also felt they needed the sacraments and the Eucharist. So that was the essence of her kind of insight, her epiphany. And from there, she's created and inspired communities in Italy and other countries. And in the United States, I think we have 4 now. I think 3 are in St. Augustine, Florida, okay, and 1 is here in Birmingham. And those in St. Augustine are both programs for men and for women.
And for women,
yeah.
Okay. Yes, I do know a young man and a young woman who was involved in the community in Italy, and both experienced, they were brother and sister, and one had an addiction, and the other just being coming from a family where there were problems that needed to be addressed. Both of them found healing in this community, a beautiful healing in this community, and now really can't stop spreading the word about the strength of such a community life.
Mm-hmm. I actually today I spoke with an ex-military chaplain who's sort of the chaplain for the community, does confessions and all. He spoke to something that I immediately noticed when I was there, which is the struggles that they have, we all have. It's a question of degree, and it's a more extreme experience when people have drug addiction, all the damage that they've wrought, all the problems in their family that may also be driving some of this, as well as them inflicting problems on their family because of the trauma associated with someone who could overdose at any time, who's maybe stolen or lied to family members. But I felt that the same when I was speaking there at this beautiful place. And let me just mention one thing. The way life slows down there, they want them to physically engage with hard work, because some of them have been kind of coasting on the surface with work, just kind of doing the minimum, maybe trying to make money through the drug trade, which is sort of, at least appears to be an easy way to do it. And so, for example, they're helping them learn to do woodworking. They don't use machines as much as possible. They use, saws, and they want them to physically go through that. They feel like we're in a society now. This is one of Mother Elvira's insights, a society where we switch buttons on and off. We press a button, everything happens. And we then think our whole emotional, spiritual life, you just switch a button. You don't struggle. You don't suffer. Things don't take time. They want people to get used to the idea that things do take time to develop the virtue of patience. So
and
they
great
now
effort. Great
exactly,
effort.
And they're now building. They're building pews for the shrine.
Oh wow!
And the bishop has a summer camp for kids that people run here. That I guess was started by the diocese. They're building things for the summer camp, bunk beds and other things. So they're contributing back to the community here.
And of course, from that there can be a great sense of accomplishment, and that's part of what hard work is all about. And that healing is not something most of us feel, just divinely healed in an instant. Most of us have to go through a process of healing, and that's precisely what this is. And that process is deep. That process is physical. That process is emotional and spiritual, and that's, I think, what is happening on this campus. Obviously, Joan, part of the interest, I think, I know it's obvious because I've talked so much with you, but part of the interest in covering this is that our country is facing a drug crisis. I mean, we are seeing spikes in overdose. We have an opioid crisis. And we are, as a Catholic newspaper, looking for ways to cover how the church might respond, but also how society is trying to respond to the problem of drugs in our culture now. What have you seen in your reporting?
Well, the most recent one, which is interesting, it brought it back up again, was the appointment of the new HHS secretary. People want Trump, the president, and they also hope the new secretary, Alex Azar, who was just sworn in, to play a bigger role. The question, Jeanette, is going to be, what role will that actually be? When I researched Azar, who's an interesting man, he's clerk for Scalia, Justice Scalia. He has had a very rich history in the federal government, but also spent 5 years as the head of the president of a drug company, which also made him very controversial because people feel that the drug companies have helped promote a dependence on drugs, both opioids, but also a sense that everything has a pill. There's a pill for everything that happens, and some of that now, including Chinookala, what people feel needs to be challenged. Can everything be solved with a pill? In any case, Azar is under pressure to resolve some of these problems. What can he do? That remains to be seen. I spoke with a bishop who heads the U.S. bishops' work on social justice and human development, and he said what the federal government could really do is help facilitate outreach at the local level, at the diocesan level, in groups like Catholic Charities, St. Vincent de Paul. I've been involved in a St. Vincent de Paul halfway house for women coming out of prison. So that's the other piece of why I've been so engaged on this. And most of those women had drug issues.
Right.
Yeah, Joan, you wrote a piece for the Register that, just a couple of weeks ago called "Catholics Bring Light to the Darkness of Opioid Addictions." And for people who may not be aware of the dimensions of the opioid crisis, you begin your story with a piece on Divine Mercy Sunday. about Deacon Lewis Bauer, who asked by a show of hands how many people here have been afflicted with or affected by addiction in your family. And in your story, you make note of the fact that he saw almost 80% of parishioners raising their hands.
Yeah, it's just tragic.
But you also make note of the fact that Pope Francis has talked about the problems of substance addiction, calling it a new form of slavery. And then you have that rather startling statistic from the Center for Disease Control that more than 6 out of 10 drug overdose deaths involve opioids.
Right.
And this is actually an older story. It's not a recent story, but it's a story that Joan had written a couple years ago, actually, not a couple weeks ago. But this is how long we have known that this problem has reached this height, and we really do, in some ways, struggle to respond as a church, as society itself is struggling to respond. I mean, every year we kind of ask ourselves, okay, what is the church doing to respond to this? And how are we as a newspaper trying to cover it? So this was one example. I think Chinoculo is another example, and we look forward to seeing how that story really shapes up, Joan. But have you noticed any other ways that the church is really reaching out to respond?
I think honestly we're still in the infancy phase, and even speaking here with Bishop Baker, we didn't really get into details. I think in the larger sense, the church is responding maybe not to the mechanism of addiction, but to the broader context, the metaphysical context, which is also a part of drug addiction, the broken families. You know, if the church can only help heal broken families and preemptively help stabilize families, that's one thing I've learned is enormously important. I met 3 young men at the Chinoculo community yesterday, and 2 spoke about the divorces in their family that had really devastated them. They didn't explain whether the divorce had to happen or not. Sometimes there's no choice, but the fact that it had happened was a big part of sort of destabilizing force in their life, and made it harder for them when they stumbled to get the support they need. So I think that's just an area. Family breakup is huge. The sense of meaninglessness, or do I have a mission? On the other side, what is the mission? And we see that at all levels. I mean, the opioid crisis reflects a broader problem. You can even see it with young people. I remember in this halfway house that I've worked in, I got to know this one young woman. She got all the way through college. She had a great job as an accountant. And then it just all collapsed. She didn't know why she did it. She had unresolved issues of childhood abandonment. It all came back when she had reason to try an opioid for a medical crisis, and then it blew up.
Yeah, I think that's so often the case as we look at other aspects of the way our society and community is breaking down. Loneliness is a huge issue. We've written about depression and the issues of depression and suicide on the rise. All of these are so interconnected with some of just the breakdown of family and the breakdown of close-knit communities. So often now the communities are on the web and in a non-spatial relationship, which is so important. Again, back to Chinoculo, where they are, the Chinoculo people are actually physical. They're there with each other, and they are going on this journey together. I think I look forward to this story, and you make me realize how I need to get up there and to take a look at what they are doing. Thanks for bringing this story to our listeners and to our readers.
You're welcome.
When we come back, staff writer Peter Jesserer Smith joins us in studio for a look at developments in pastoral care at parishes. Stay tuned on Register Radio, here on EWTN.
Father Wade Menezes talks about the National Catholic Register.
As the National Catholic Register celebrates its 90th anniversary, I think that says a lot about the publication. It works. It's solidly Catholic. It presents the teachings of the Church, unabashedly so, and also guides its readers to be even more solidly Catholic themselves. One of the major effects that I think the Register has on its readers is that it elevates the intellect. Whether it be a faith item or a news item, it presents the news and the faith item in a very balanced way. One thing that the Register can never be accused of is being too far left or too far right. It is solidly Catholic, right in line with the Chair of Peter. And I think that says a lot about the Register.
For a 6-issue free trial of the National Catholic Register, go to ncregister.com and click on the 6 free issue banner, or call 800-421-3230 for your 6 free issues. And as you await your first issue, enjoy some of our online content.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
Welcome back to Register Radio. I'm Jeanette DeMello, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register and co-host for Register Radio.
And I'm Matthew Bunson, Senior Editor for the National Catholic Register and also co-host of Register Radio.
And we are joined in studio by our staff writer, Peter Jesserer Smith, who comes from Rochester, New York, and has been here in Birmingham for staff meetings. Welcome, Peter.
Oh, thank you, Jeanette. It's always a pleasure to be here.
It's great to actually speak to you on radio, but face-to-face, because it just slows us down a bit and we can make eye contact.
Yep, it's a different dynamic, but I enjoy being here, and great to be here with you as well, Matthew.
And we spoke with Joan earlier in this show about something kind of like that, eye contact and face-to-face contact, and this is in a community of healing, a community that is really working on helping young men rehabilitate after addiction. And you've done some work on how our parishes are able to help us become a little bit more grounded
Yes.
after being in a world that is increasingly more frenetic, a world that is increasingly actually more lonely.
Yes, absolutely.
So what have you seen?
Well, this is one of the great joys that I have writing for the Register, has been to do some real investigative work for the church into how can we provide positive solutions and approaches to the crises of our modern day. And one of them definitely is the spiritual crisis of loneliness, this pain of betrayal at a fundamental level that just pervades their society. We focus a lot on how, the millennials, my generation, why don't they buy this or why don't they do that? Why don't millennials go bring their kids back to Catholic school like their parents used to? Well, one of the fundamental reasons I think for that is because if the family has not maintained its loyalty to them, the most basic institution that they ever knew, why do they need to maintain loyalty to these other institutions that have been passed on to them? And the answer is they don't. Mm-hmm. And so this really provides an opportunity for the church to understand the landscape of woundedness that we have out there. I mean, in Monroe County, where I live,
So the Diocese of Rochester.
in the Diocese of Rochester, we are seeing this scourge reported on the news with monthly death tolls from opioids, and it afflicts every single layer of society, rich and poor. This is a fundamental crisis that we have going on here. And one of the exciting things I've been looking at is how Catholic parish culture, if it is actually oriented towards a real sense of community and belonging, can really invite people into a very healing and supportive experience, either so that they can find themselves or that they can be supported before these crises develop.
Happen.
One of the questions that's often asked today in the wake of things like the opioid crisis, why not just let the government take care of this? What is the fundamental role that parishes can play, that the church can play, that the government can't?
Well, I'll give you an answer. It's because the government can't love you. Mm. This is actually born out of experience. My mother helps. My mother has always been wonderfully involved with a ministry in the heart of Rochester, in which she and a wonderful nun named Sister Peg Brennan, they serve meals to a lot of people who are struggling and on the margins, and one of them is opioid addiction. But a lot of things that people do say is that there's a power dynamic that is involved when it's just you approaching the government, and it's a point of enormous vulnerability. People turn to the church because they have at least some sense that people like my mother, Sister Peg, actually care about them and love them, and that's why they're there. And honestly, that's why we need far more social resources and support directed to those people for whom taking care of those on the margins and suffering addiction is not just a job, but it's a real calling and a ministry of love. And that's that's where we need it.
You know, I can identify with that in some of the work that I've done, and you know, just walking the streets of Denver when I lived there and offering, you know, bags of cookies even to people on the streets. I think some friends and I did that one Easter. And the people who were receiving these cookies from us, and we'd say Happy Easter, you know, they were like, well, hey, yeah, thanks. What organization are you with? And we're like, no, it's just us. We just decided to do this. We wanted to share, you know, the Easter joy.
Yes.
And they were blown away. I mean, literally, they were like following us around, talking with us because they couldn't believe that we were doing this on our own accord, out of love. So I agree with what you're saying there.
And I think that's actually another point that a lot of Catholics don't appreciate is you need to be engaged directly in these ministries to the poor, and you need to be involved in this opioid addiction. Even things like
not the addiction,
no, not the addiction, but in helping people afflicted to this. Even things like when certain members of our community are experiencing problems of race and racism, we have to have a sense of solidarity with all those people and see them as all part of our community. And I think that can only really happen if we have parishes with priests and select disciples that they have make an intentional effort to change our parish culture, because Catholic parish culture, overwhelmingly, a lot of people report it's very individualistic. You can walk into a church and walk out and nobody will ask for you.
Well, let's make it more concrete. What are some of the things that you have seen that are effective? Are some of the things that people in the parish community structure also have suggested helps to make parishioners feel connected?
One of the areas in which parish culture is actually changing from the ground up, with the story that I'm working on about essentially startup Catholic churches. Now, I know a lot of people don't think about that, but we actually have them in the Catholic Church. In Denver, there are 2 parishes that are starting. They're spun off of a larger parish, but it's honestly the priests working with people who are committed to building an authentic Catholic life. It's where you're seeing the other people as your friends, as part of your extended family, as mentors, that you're building this church community, you're inviting each other to be part of it. It's all very, very intentional. So there's 2 things going on here. You either have to start within a church and get people to see that. For example,
create community within a church.
Create community. Now, so many Catholics think, well, I posted a sign that said welcome, and I have a greeter, and we're welcoming. No, it's not. It's actually when, you know, if you're in my church and I say, hey, Jeanette, how are you doing? Hey, I missed you. Or if you've been gone, I say, hey, I haven't seen you in church the past couple weeks. Is everything okay? What's going on? Or, hey, we're praying for you. We heard about that. Somebody recognizes when I'm there, and they take a real deep personal interest in me. I belong to a little parish community called Fellowship of St. Alban. It's part of the Ordinariate, but I love that experience. Why I joined that community was because people asked my name and they invited me in, and I felt, wow, now I can count. Now I can say these people are truly my friends and my parish family in a way I really didn't experience.
So how would this work, for example, on some of these, I hate to use the term mega parish, but because we've got consolidations and everything else,
yes,
we now have parishes that can have up to 6,000-7,000 families.
Yes.
With only, say, 2 priests, a retired priest, and then some lay associates who help run things. It really does have to have the buy-in of the lay people, doesn't it?
Well, it absolutely does, and in the story that I'm writing, it's going to illustrate that. But you know, one of the people that we can actually learn from are some of these Protestant mega churches. Not saying all of them, but there's one near me in Buffalo that what they do is they have small groups, and they make sure that people are involved and active, and they feel invited into them, so that these people have something that they can identify with within this larger parish. We have the tools to do this.
Sure.
We have, a priest. We could use more deacons, and we could actually use what I would say is instituted acolytes. Now, these are laymen who kind of perform a kind of a subdiaconal ministry, but who can help with their wives and the deacons' wives, but basically help take care of the people in the parish, break down, move out. Make sure that people who come in and come out are greeted and recognized. It doesn't make sense to have 7,000 families on the books and you only see 700 of them.
Sure.
That's not a family.
Sure.
That's a family that needs to be reintegrated.
One of the terms that's often used, and we saw that with the Comunità Cenaculo, is restorative. It's restorational. Do you see this as an opportunity for the church to help rebuild society by, if nothing else, helping to rebuild trust in the idea of the family?
Oh, absolutely.
Of the church's family, but also, of course, the domestic church.
I mean, absolutely. Think about the church. We have the resources. We have buildings. You can disciple people and get them involved as volunteers. But this is an opportunity for the parish to be kind of a hub where families can come together in an intentional way, link with other families, and support each other, to pray with each other, mourn with each other. The community has fallen apart. We Catholics can recover that. If we look back into our history, pull some of these things together and say, let's come together as an actual community that prays together, that loves Jesus together, and is going to support each other on this journey. I think it's very possible. There are a lot of great ideas going on, and I'm looking forward to reporting more of them.
Yeah, we look forward to that story, and it really does tie back to what Joan was saying. I mean, so much of our crises, whether it's drugs or depression or suicides that are taking people's lives, are fundamental. Cell of society has been destroyed, and that's family, and then and second to that is community. And this is an opportunity to rebuild that and to love one another in that way with the sacraments and through the church. And so
that great line that Peter said when we asked him about the role of government. Government has its place, but it can't love.
It cannot love. It cannot love. And it is us. We must learn to love in and through the church. And,
absolutely.
And so I look forward to that story, Peter. Thanks for your insights today and giving us a little snapshot to what can be read at ncregister.com.
Well, thank you, Jeanette. Looking forward to more.
For more news, analysis, and in-depth commentary, check out ncregister.com. On behalf of my co-host Matthew Bunson and our producer Jeff Burson and yours truly, Jeanette DeMello, I thank you for listening and pray God bless you.